Okay, hello guys, and welcome to this AWS tutorial. In this video, I'm going to walk through how to create and set up a file gateway so that we can store and back up our files from our network and computer directly to the AWS cloud, specifically Amazon S3 bucket, without having to log into the AWS console or write any code to use the API. So really think about how file shares work and how you can simply map a file share to your workstation and be able to transfer files. That's what we're going to try to replicate here. So let's go ahead and get started. So this is the AWS Management Console. So you need an AWS account and you can get one for free. And once you're in here, you want to click on Services and then search for the Storage Gateway service. Click on Get Started, and then we're going to be creating a file gateway, so you want to select Next, and then you can select the host platform where you want to install your OVF or you want to deploy your OVF image to. You can select Hyper-V, Linux KVM, or even deploy the image on Amazon EC2. I'm going to be deploying mine on a VMware ESXi environment. So you just want to click on download image. I already did that, so it takes a little bit over, depending on your internet, about 2 to 3 minutes to download that file. So once you have that file, you want to select Next, and you want to go to your vSphere environment or portal where you're going to be deploying that file that you just downloaded. So here you would right click on the host that you want to deploy it on if you have multiple hosts. I only have one in this case. You want to deploy your OVF template and then choose the file that you recently just downloaded, AWS Storage Gateway. Hit Next. You can change the name if you want. I'm going to leave mine default. Hit Next. Next again, just leaves that default. And then it's going to take about 2 or 3 minutes here to validate that file. So I'm going to pause the video. So once your file is downloaded or validated, just want to verify the details. Amazon does, or AWS does, recommend using thick provisioned for the root file disk. So I'm going to leave that default and then hit Next. Select your data store. I'm going to select my Synology data store and then hit Next. And then for my network, you just want to select a network that obviously has internet access and also a network that is that you can reach the IP of your virtual machine using your browser. So all of my other networks are segmented by virtual switches, so I'm just going to select my VM network so I can get an IP that I can reach with my browser. And then I'll hit Next. And you just want to confirm the information. Also, another thing that you can do is create and set up another disk that's going to be used for caching. But we can do that later on, and I'll show you how to do that once we get to that point. So you just want to hit Finish and allow for vSphere to deploy that image for you. And here I'm going to pause the video and I'll be back once that's completed. So once your OVF is completely deployed, you just want to click on it and start the VM or power on the VM. And then just open this up using a web console or your VMware remote console. And your booting is going to take a couple of minutes, so I will pause the video once again and I'll be right back. So once your VM is done booting, you'll be presented with a prompt. So you just want to log in using the default username, which is admin, and the default password, which is simply just password. So as you can see here, I have been automatically assigned an IP by my DHCP server, but if you don't have an IP, you can statically assign one by just following the prompts and pressing 2 for network configuration, and also pressing 3 to enter your static IP, and you just put in ETH0 for the interface. Excuse me. So you press 2 for network config, 3 for static IP, ETH0, and then you enter your IP, and then the next prompt will ask you for your subnet mask, and then the next one will be for your default gateway. But since I already have an IP, I'm not going to do that. Also, you want to make sure that you have your DNS configured. So in here, because I have my IPs already assigned automatically, it's going to use my default DNS provided by my server, my default gateway. So I'm just going to back out of that as well, but just to let you know that you are able to change your DNS. Yep, so that's my DNS server that's assigned by my DHCP. And one more thing that we want to do here is to sync the time. So you want to press 5 on the home screen, and then you want to view and synchronize your time. If you have an NTP server in your organization that you want to sync to, you can edit the NTP config and add that server address in there. But I'm just going to sync to the AWS default server. Perfect. So exit. So once this is done, I'm going to head back into the AWS console and then move forward. So there are 2 options here for to set up a service endpoint. And you can activate your service, your gateway using a public endpoint. And essentially this is just going to have the gateway communicate to AWS storage over the public internet. Still encrypted, of course, but if you have a VPC already set up, or if you want to set up a VPC, you also have that option as well. So the traffic is going to be encrypted using a tunnel between your VPC and your network, or your on-prem gateway network. In this case, I'm just going to use a public endpoint, and then select next, and then you want to type in the IP address of your gateway, and this is when I mentioned your browser needs to have access to that IP. This is what I meant. So I'm going to say 192.168.0.100. So 192.168.0.100 in here, and you want to click on connect to your gateway, and then it's going to pop up with this screen to allow you to activate that, and you want to select the time zone, currently Eastern time, and give your gateway a name, and we're just going to give it Zango Bolts Gateway, and just copy a tag in there, and then you want to activate your gateway. So gateway is now active. If you want, you can configure your login of activities to your your gateway activities. Create a new log group. I don't have a log group set up already for this. And create a log group, and I'm going to call that log group create. And it's just taking long. I'm going to pause the video and give this a couple of minutes to load up. So after giving it a couple of minutes, now my gateway is now running. So what we need to do is, like I said, we can enable login if we want to. I already created my log group, and I'm just going to have login to that log group, and then save. And I also mentioned we need an additional hard drive allocated in our VMware environment for caching. As you can see, we don't have any local disk currently allocated or added to that virtual machine, so we need to go ahead and do that. So just go back to vSphere, and we can edit this setting on this box. You want to add a new device and add a new hard disk. And then I believe the recommended or the minimum is 15 GB. So I'm just going to go ahead and give it 80. I'm going to give it 100. Actually, I believe the recommended is 150. So I'll give it 300. And then click on OK. And immediately you should see your storage gateway recognize that local hard disk. So we gave it 300 gigabytes of capacity, and we want to allocate it to the cache. And click on save, and our error is cleared out. So now the next thing that we want to do is create a file share, and we want to configure the file share to store the data in an S3 bucket, which I don't believe we have an S3 bucket yet. So let's go ahead and create an S3 bucket. Click on service and type in S3. And you want to create a new bucket, and the bucket name we'll call is backup, but you can obviously call it whatever you want. And you want to I want to leave mine in the North Virginia region, and leave everything else default and invalid characters. Okay, so I'm going to use hyphen instead, and then create the bucket. Bucket successfully created. So we just want to grab the name of that bucket and paste that into our bucket name. And keep in mind, if you post anything else, should not accept. Bucket name is invalid. So you want to make sure that you type in the actual bucket name. And we want to create a network file system. And this is our gateway. And if you wanted to add a tag, you could. Then click on next. And select your storage class. So I don't believe with S3 any of these you probably get less or get charged less with this, but I don't believe it's that much where it makes that much of a difference. So I think for this one we're good to go ahead and select just the S3 standard and leave everything else the same, and then select on next. And then it's just giving you information about the file share that's being created and the clients that are going to be able to access this. You can make changes to that if you want, but I'm just going to go ahead and create the file share. And it is currently creating, but just to kind of point out some of the information that we have here. So this is how we're going to be able to connect or mount that backup. So it gives us the command if you wanted to mount on a Linux system or on a Windows system. These are the commands that we're going to run. So once it's created, We're going to pause the video. Once it's created, I'll come back and we're going to run through one of these commands and on a Linux server that has access to has access to this IP, and we're going to mount it and see how we can add files and how that's going to show up in S3. I will be right back. So our file share is now showing as available. So let's try to mount this to a Linux server, and we're going to try to mount that and then add some files to this file share and see how that is getting saved into S3. So just to kind of show you what our S3 bucket looks like, as you can see, this is currently empty. We don't have anything in here. And you just want to copy this command. And if you have a Windows and you want to work on a Windows or mount this on a Windows computer, you're obviously going to use that command and then just change this last bit to the drive letter that you want to map it to. And same as Mac, but I'm going to be using a Linux computer or Linux server that I have access to here. So paste that command, and I want to just mount this to /mount. So it looks like I need to install some libraries. I'm going to pause the video while I wait for my updates, and I'll be back to show you how that is mounted. So nothing on Linux is ever straightforward, so had a little bit of struggles, but I was able to I had to, I guess, install NFL's utils on my Red Hat box to be able to get this to work. So first you just want to update yum update, and this is beyond the scope of this class, but just kind of wanted to just show how troubleshooting my issue. And dnf install nfs util, and then you just want to mount or add the mount command that we got from AWS, and you can mount this to whatever path that you want, but /mount works for me. And then you just want to change directory to that mount, and obviously there's nothing in here, so what I'm going to do is try to upload a file. So I have a CISSP file in here that I'm just going to drag and actually paste that into our mount directory. And it's loading, and now we have that installed in here. So if you run ls, you see that file, CISSP file in there. So now let's go back to our S3, and you just want to refresh, and now we see that file in here. So again, pretty straightforward, I think. Once you're able to kind of set everything up, it's just a matter of selecting one of these commands, mounting that to your workstation or your server, and now you can easily just transfer files to it, and that will show up in S3. And once you're in S3, obviously you have the ability to set the different options that S3 has. If you want to encrypt your box, your S3 bucket, apply some bucket level permissions or access control to your individual objects in there, you can do that as well. And just leverage the many different services that AWS has. So the final thing that I'm just going to walk through is a little bit of troubleshooting some of the issues that I ran into while trying to figure this out. So there are two main troubleshooting tips that I want to give while setting this up. So if you're having difficulty setting this up or you're getting some errors, I would come in here. If you're having difficulty setting up your gateway, I would come in here and test your network connectivity. So what I've noticed were a lot of enterprise or companies have firewall rules that are blocking outbound connection to the outside world, to AWS. So if you're especially connecting to using a VPC, or you're using the public endpoint, you just want to make sure that you test the network connection and make sure that you're getting all passes. If you're not getting passes, or you're getting failed, then you want to double check with your network team that if you have firewall blocking those ports that are required, and make sure that those ports are open to allow your gateway to talk to Amazon. Also, another thing to keep in mind is if you're getting an error while trying to create your storage gateway, you want to verify that you have all the permissions that you need in AWS. So AWS is denied by default, or everything is denied by default. So you want to ensure that you have all the permissions that you need to be able to set up what you need to. So right now I'm working with my root account, my AWS root account, but you just want to make sure that you have the right policies that are attached to that user to be able to do what they need to do. So, all right, well, that's it for this video. Hope you enjoyed it. So I will be seeing you guys on my next video. Later.